Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for clicking onto this video. If you've clicked on this video, it's possibly because you have an interview coming up for a PGDE programme in Scotland, and that is fantastic. So first things first, congratulations on getting this far in the application process. It is a huge achievement and you should be very, very proud of yourself. So for those of you that don't know, you need to do a PGDE in order to become a secondary school history teacher in Scotland, and it's a competitive programme. It's really, really difficult to get onto. My interview was online, so it was a video interview over Zoom and Skype, and in a way I think that was a lot easier. There was a lot less pressure on me, you know. So in Scotland you apply through UCAS and you get 5 choices. So I applied for 4? I applied to Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Strathclyde, Glasgow. Also I applied for 4 and I got 3 interviews out of those 4 applications. Out of those 3 interviews I got 2 offers. I got offered a place at Aberdeen and I got offered a place at Edinburgh. And I went for Edinburgh just because it was closer. And as I said, all of those interviews were online because it was during the pandemic, so it was the beginning of 2022, so coming out of the pandemic, but things were still online. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be talking about, my own experience through the PGDE interviews. Hopefully you find it useful, and fingers crossed for you, because I know how difficult and how scary they are, but I'm sure you'll do fantastic. So what did I do in order to prepare myself for this interview? This wasn't a last minute decision for me, so I prepared for a long time. I knew I wanted to go into history teaching from the beginning of my degree, but that is not to say that if this is something you've decided later on and you've got an interview and maybe you don't have as much time to prepare, that you won't do just as wonderful and that you can't prepare to the same extent that I did. But the very first thing I did was bought an interview skills book. So I'm not going to chat about basic interview skills because I think there's a lot of material out there. Now, this was a book called The Interview Book, I think, and it's by someone called James Innes, and that was fantastic. It just broke down all the basics of what you need to know to perform well in an interview. All the really basic stuff like the importance of first impressions and how to answer questions and what to wear, like it breaks down everything. I also did lots of background reading on Scottish education. You can find a lot of this on just the Scottish Government website. There's the most recent OECD report. It was so helpful reading that. I read the whole report and it gave me a really good insight into Scottish education and maybe some of the limitations and maybe some points that are the centre of a lot of debates just now in education. I also just generally familiarised myself with the Scottish Education website. On that website there's lots of information on the Scottish curriculum and the attainment challenge, so I essentially familiarised myself with the main Scottish Education websites, the Scottish Government website, and I read the key Scottish Education policies and documents. I also read the course description very carefully. So each of the courses, whether that be the Edinburgh PGDE, the Glasgow PGDE, I read it carefully, and through these course websites you can find kind of the course outline and also the course organisers, and they usually have their contact details, the staff details on the websites. So through these websites I was able to email the course organisers and introduce myself saying, hey, my name's Jade, I'm interested in applying, can you give me any advice or can you direct me to any resources that I might want to familiarise myself with before the interview. Also on these course websites they have reading lists, so I downloaded some key readings, I bought some key books that I thought would be useful from these course reading lists, again to get me familiar with the language of education. Another thing I did was going through LinkedIn. So through LinkedIn I was able to find people that work at the universities, work on in like the schools of education and message them again saying, can you recommend any readings or any advice? I could also look up anyone on LinkedIn who recently graduated from that course and how they were doing, so I could email and say, hey, I just noticed you've graduated and you're working as a history teacher, how are you getting on, can you give me any advice for the interview? And again, I got a couple of really useful responses, so just trying to build up contacts in that way. So I actually managed to find the person that ended up interviewing me. So on LinkedIn I ended up messaging her saying, oh, you work at Moray House. She gave me some excellent articles, and then she ended up being the person interviewing me, so it does pay off. And I have a couple books here that I would recommend definitely. So this one, Scottish Education. I bought this I think in my second or third year of university, because again I knew I was going in, I knew I wanted to apply for teaching. Now this is a massive book, it's ridiculous, it's like almost 1,000 pages long, I think, it's huge. But they're split into really small chapters and it covers everything. And by no means have I read all of this, I've not even read a quarter of it. I've literally read just a couple chapters, but I thought this was really, really useful and I would recommend it if you maybe don't know a little bit of Scottish education or you want something that has it all in one place. I would recommend that. And this book was excellent. Again, it's split into lots of different chapters and they're written by kind of key educators, key, researchers, key teachers, and it's filled with just really some beautiful insights on what it means to be working class. So that's another book I would definitely recommend. These two I did not read before my interview, but they're books I have started reading since getting onto the programme. One of them is Key Debates in History Teaching, so this is history specific, but obviously there's books out here for different subjects, chemistry, biology, and key debates and modern studies teaching. This is excellent. And then Social Justice Re-Examined, it's another core text on my PGDE course. It's an excellent book. All about social justice and how to meet the needs of pupils from different backgrounds, and so how to create an equitable education and work towards social justice in your practice. So they're not books I read for the interview, but they are really good books nonetheless. I would recommend them. So that's kind of everything I did in the run-up to the interview. In terms of the interview questions, the universities, I think, emailed me the questions they were going to ask, or at least two of them did. So I knew some of the questions, which was great. Others, that's not to say they didn't ask me questions that weren't on those lists. For me, the Glasgow interview, they asked me 5 questions. I knew them in advance and I could prepare for them, and they stuck to those 5 questions, whereas the Edinburgh interview sent me the questions, but still asked me other questions on top of those set ones that they'd sent, so I had to be prepared for both. I can't say exactly what they are going to ask you, and I can't predict, but I think there's generally very similar questions come up year in, year out, and just general interview questions that come up that aren't necessarily PGDE related. What came up was, tell me a little bit about yourself. And again, having read an interview skills book, I knew that they weren't looking for a 20-minute life story. They were looking for kind of an elevator pitch about me. So they were looking for my a very brief background of my history related to working with young people. And that's what I gave them, very brief, kept it short, and that's something I had prepared in my head and ready to answer that question. Another question that is inevitably going to come up is, why do you want to teach? Now that's a main key question that they're asking, and it's important that you're able to answer that. It seems really obvious, but you need to be able to very explicitly say why you want to teach, and it takes some thought. It takes a lot of mulling that over and sitting with it, and I made sure to sit with that one the longest and write out an answer and then redraft and then practice my answer so that I was confident to answer that question. Another one is, what skills can you bring? And again, these will all be worded differently, but yeah, what qualities do you have that will make you a good teacher? And again, in that case, they're looking for organisation and communication and empathy and, you know, all these qualities that make a good educator. They're looking for, well, what can you bring, and give me an example of when you've done that and when it's been successful. And then on the flip side of that, they might ask, well, what's your biggest weakness? What's your weakness? And that's again a difficult thing to be able to recognise. What you don't do, you know, you don't want to turn around and go, well, I don't have a weakness. Everyone does. But say, well, actually something I've struggled with in the past is, say, time management or organisation, but then flip it so that you can turn that into a positive. So that's a negative, but actually here's some steps I've taken so that for me that's becoming more of a strength. So you can kind of flip that question, and that's what I did. I think I said something like, I think it was time management. I struggle with time management, or sometimes I struggle to deal with pressure, but here's how I've mitigated that, and gave them my strategy, basically. Thinking about weaknesses, something they ask is pressure. How do you work under pressure? And the course is very, very demanding. It's a really demanding course. It's a really difficult year, and they want to see you can handle the weight of it, that you're going to handle it and you're not going to crack under the pressure. You're going to cope with the demands. What did I say? I said something along the lines of, I actually thrive when I work under pressure. It forces me to be creative and work hard. However, you know, too much pressure can become difficult, but fortunately I draw on the support network around me and my friends and family and those kind of things. So I gave strategies, what do I do to mitigate that? So to show them that, yeah, pressure impacts me just like it impacts any other human being, but here are the things I do myself to cope with that and manage that. And I also gave an example of a high pressure situation that I'd worked in, and even better if you can do that with young people, but yeah, it doesn't need to be, you know, a high pressure situation you've been in that demonstrates you can work well under pressure. Oh, and then something specific to your subject. So my subject is obviously history, and they might ask you, you know, why history, or what's your favourite thing to teach about history, or your favourite subject. Just something to do with your subject. You're obviously there to convince them that you want to be a teacher, but you're also there to convince them that you love your subject, and you're there to teach your subject because you love it so much and you're passionate about it. So yeah, something about your subject specifically. And then last but not least, some of the key debates in Scottish education just now, where they might pick a specific one. Can you tell me about the attainment challenge? Something along those lines. So make sure you're prepared to answer a question on the key debates. They want to see that you have read your stuff, you know what you're talking about, and you're going into this new educational landscape kind of already aware of what's going on. And then last but not least, why you? Why should they pick you? You're there to convince them that you deserve to be there, that you have the skills, the capacities to cope with it. And I'm sure you do, so convince them. Do not be modest. And it is difficult to sit in front of someone or sit in front of a screen and try and convince them that you're the person they should pick. At the end of my interview for Edinburgh, I was told, or I was asked, there's 300 other interviewees. You know, there's 300 other people interviewing for this. Why should we pick you? And that question really shocked me. I knew it was competitive, really competitive, and I wasn't naive, you know, about that. But getting that question, I remember the moment going, it just like kind of broke my heart a little bit hearing that question. But be prepared for it. I think I said something like, oh gosh, and I took a breath and I closed my eyes, and when I reopened them I just said, again, I tried to convince them, why me? So I didn't, you know, even though that was so difficult to hear and just made me feel so deflated and upset, I tried not to let it show. I just took a deep breath and was like, you know what? I deserve to be here just as much as the next person does. And that's a difficult thing to do. So prepare for that. Why you? Why you out of 300 other people? You know, hopefully it's not that many. But yeah, prepare for that question because it might come up. So I think that's everything, and I'm sure I have missed something. Again, I could go on and on about basic interview skills, but I don't feel that knowledgeable about that. Everything I know is from the book I read on interview skills, so would 100% recommend any book on interviews. But yeah, what I would say is practice, practice, practice. I was already in university at the time doing my history degree, so I could go to the careers team and say, hey, can I have a mock interview to practice? So that's something I did. I got feedback from them, was able to improve, so that's something else I did. So I would recommend just practice, practice, practice. Do it in front of someone you know if you want to. I did it in front of my partner, I did it in front of anyone that would let me, my mum, and it was awkward and I'm sure we laughed and it was cringy. But just practicing, it meant when I came to the actual interview and I sat down, and again it was just in front of a camera, so you know, take everything I'm saying with a pinch of salt, but I was sitting in front of a camera and I knew what I wanted to say. Just do your best, that's all you can do, and just believe in yourself. Believe in yourself because you deserve to be there. If you've got to the interview stage, you deserve to be there just as much as anybody else. And best of luck. Fingers are crossed for anyone that is going through their interviews or waiting to hear back from interviews. I know it's like the worst feeling in the pit of your stomach. Stay positive. But if you don't get in, don't give up. If it's meant for you, it's meant for you. You know, they say what's for you won't go by you. So if you don't get in, don't give up. I have some people I know that applied last year with me, they didn't get in. They've applied again this year, they got some more experience and they got in this year. You know, they're absolutely delighted. They didn't give up, they kept going, and here they are. They're about to start their career in teaching, well, their PGDE journey. So don't give up. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm sure I've missed loads and loads, but that's just what I did to prepare for my PGDE interview. So fingers crossed, and thank you again for watching. Best of luck.